Are you sure you want to put this live? Yes, I have confidence in my work.
Your event is starting and we're live. What is up, everybody? It is Sunday, the 21st of January, and this is the Snappy-Tech podcast, episode number 27, with the wonderful Mark Steadman. Hello, how are you?
Hello, I'm very well, thank you. It's Sunday. My broadband went out yesterday, so I'm catching up on everything that needs to be done. It's all good. How are you?
Is it Virgin Media by any chance?
Yeah, but I was going to say it wasn't their fault.
Right.
It might not be their fault. The
Okay.
router or the modem just sort of fell over and died or something. And so I rang them up and said, I'm going to need a new router. Yes, I've checked the power button. Yes, I definitely know that it's not the power button. Can you please send me a new router? And they said, yeah, we'll send you a new one, a modem, because I use an actual router.
Yeah.
But so, yeah, so, the modem, blinking lights, nothing. No lights whatsoever. So I'm like, no, it's not getting power at all. So that's great. And then I get on with a bunch of stuff. And a few hours later, I think, you know what, I'm just gonna try it again. Just gonna have another look. And looked at it, pressed the thing, and it didn't come on. Oh, okay, good. All right. Well, at least I'm not going mad. Check the back, the button on the back. Press that. Router turned on. So.
Oh, that is... Oops.
New router coming.
You know what? It's always good to upgrade, right? You might as well.
Yeah.
On,
I mean, I've had the same one for 3 years, so it's time to go blazing fast.
Yes. We had actual router problems. So before I moved to Georgia, we got the highest end home business setup money can buy. It was whatever the highest speed thing they offer is 400 down and 20 up or whatever it is. So we got that, and we were noticing that our speeds were really slow. And when I say really slow, I don't mean we only got 250. We were getting 5 down.
Ooh.
So we look into it. We have no idea what it is. We call Virgin Media the first time. They're like, no idea. Go into, they do their business support thing, find nothing. We report it a second time to say, guys, seriously, what the hell's going on here? And I get through to the phone with someone else, and they're like, we've just looked at your account, and it seems like you've purchased some static IPs. I'm like, yeah, I have, because it's always useful to have, and I'm sure I'll find a use for them eventually. And they go, well, we've discovered that there's a known issue with our Triton routers and not working properly with static IPs. I'm like, that might be a bit of an issue.
Yeah.
So you're telling me anyone who has this router and a static IP just gets a really bad internet? And they're like, yeah, that's exactly it. And I go, so what's the thing I can do here? Yeah. And they go, well, we have 3 options. We can either get rid of your static IPs, and I'm like, I kind of want them. Then they go, or you can wait until the end of January when the next firmware update is due. And I'm like, don't want that either. And they go, or we can enroll you onto our firmware beta program where you get 2 months of free internet access in exchange for using beta firmware. And I'm like, this just sounds like a win-win. Sign me up.
Clearly that option.
That's clearly the one I want.
Option. Yeah.
So, we got that set up, and the process took 24 hours between me telling them to do it and it actually going through. And lo and behold, we get 400 down.
Boom. Oh, that's nice. I mean, I get about 150 down here if I'm not wired. Then I get 150, sometimes 160 of slightly unreliable Wi-Fi.
Right.
Because there is a Faraday cage somewhere in my flat. And so internet, any kind of radio signal doesn't travel from the living room where all of the things are to the office here. There is something in between the two spots that just kills all radio signals.
I was going to say, is it a literal Faraday cage? Where'd you have one of those?
But it could well be. It might as well be. But it's
built into the walls. They've just
absolutely. It's
sealed it
some
off.
kind of a cavity insulation that seems to kill signals. so I bought one of these expensive routers, the equivalent, the attainable British equivalent of the Eero, because can't
Right.
get them here, which is the Orbi, and it's made by Netgear, I think, and it's very, very good, and it gets rid of 95% of my Wi-Fi problems. But then every now and again, it will just completely die, and the routers will go. The satellites will go. Oh, I don't know what it is. Internet. Where is it? And so for that, I have a wired connection, and that's fine, except it's a power line adapter, and it doesn't get the same kind of speeds. So I could go for it's mostly reliable 160 down, or completely solid 70 down. And at
Right.
the moment, I'm going completely solid.
Interestingly, now, so you'll be aware, and I'm sure everyone in the UK is. The internet in the UK is ADSL, right? It's asymmetrical.
It is if you're on
Mostly.
BT, whereas I think I might be wrong, but I think Virgin is a different system.
No, Virgin. It might. It's
You know more
it's
than I would, but
it's
I
fiber,
thought
but
it was yeah.
it's definitely asymmetrical, which is
Okay.
the part of it I was sort of more leaning towards as opposed to
Yes.
the DSL bit. So
Yes,
it's asymmetrical.
It's definitely asymmetrical. Yes.
This is because it's to prevent people from torrenting stuff, as far as I'm aware.
Yeah.
So when you one of the big things of using their business lines is that the thing that really pissed me off when using Virgin Media is unless you're on their home business line, they actually throttle your upload. So if you upload more than 1 gigabyte worth of data in a day, they start throttling, which is an issue when you're trying to live stream 4K content because it becomes a gigabyte after 2 minutes.
Yes. Oh, that explains possibly
That'll
why
explain a lot.
That does explain a lot. Yeah, because I keep thinking I should ring them up and see if I can get some sort of business service from Virgin.
Yes, yeah, that'll be it. So I don't know what the exact number is. It's probably more than 1 gigabyte. But it would be whenever I was uploading a video onto YouTube, the first however much uploads quite quickly, and then the upload gets throttled for 24 hours, which is really useful.
You've opened my mind.
And that is specifically for stopping people torrenting stuff. So when you upgrade to the business internet, they first of all turn off that throttle criteria, and second of all, the upload speed tends to be faster anyway.
Yes.
However, in Georgia, they have no concept of asymmetrical data. They're like, why would you do that? So I'm currently using 4G to broadcast this.
Wow.
Because basically, it is actually ADSL here, right? On top of that, I'm currently in a pretty remote part of Georgia. So we don't have our ISP options. There are 2 or 3 options, but they're all quite slow. We're on the fastest internet connection you can get at our house, and it's 20 down and 20 up.
Right.
Which, though okay, isn't that reliable as well. So I'm on my 4G connection, which is about 80 down and 80 up. And the 80 up is the bit that I love.
Yeah, that's gorgeous.
Because I'll be, doing something like this. Because in the UK, doing a 4K podcast is actually quite hard because this specifically is currently running at 35 up. And
wow.
It's just almost impossible to pull off in the UK unless you're on a 4K connection, on a 4G connection. So I have 4G with, I'm going to try to not unplug this because I've done that before. I have this wired into my PC with a 4G LTE full connection that's currently pulling 80 down and 80 up.
Wow. Oh, I'm jealous.
And I've always said this, and I've said this jokingly to Virgin Media as well. I've always been as much as I love having 400 down, I would much rather have 200 down and 100 up than 400 down and 25 up.
Yes, absolutely. Well, according to Virgin Media, I could get up to 350 megabytes or megabits down if I went for their business option.
Right. Yeah, their business option tends to also be, they have the slightly faster speed, and then I don't know what their cap is for upload throttling.
Yeah, well, I can go for their Voom service, George. I could go Voom.
Yes, they
Um,
have their naming scheme isn't exactly the most.
what's after Voom? Super Voom?
I think it is.
Um,
It might actually be
no.
that.
Well, it just says Voom Fiber Bundle Option 2. I
Oh
mean, they've
yes.
put some work into Voom. I'd quite like something like Vree. Let's really go creative with the names.
So
Or
look,
Whoosh.
so looking at Vivid 150, which is one I'm assuming you're on, more or less. Um,
Um, yeah. Well, yeah, it must be.
that's most likely it. So you get an upload
Yeah.
speed of 10 megabit per second.
Yeah.
Cool, cool. The measurement time starts at 6 p.m.
Of course it does,
So
because that's off peak. Or that's
yes.
peak, rather. Yeah.
So you get
Home time.
4.5 gigabytes, 4,500 megabytes to be exact, of upload until your upload speed gets throttled by
And
approximately 70%.
70%. That's a lot of percent. And something awful's just happened, George.
What
My
has?
doorbell's just gone.
Oh no!
I'm going to dispatch this very quickly, if
Go
that's
for it.
okay.
Yeah, no,
I will.
absolutely.
Yeah, I'm going to run.
The wonders of live podcasting. Anything can happen when you're live. So Paul is currently in chat. Paul, how are you doing? I'm tempted to keep paying the extra money for the extra 5 gigabytes of data on my phone because the 4G speed is so much better than your broadband. He gets 35 down. Oof, I do not envy that one. My internet is currently acting up a touch, from what I can tell. I've dropped a bunch of frames randomly, but I think we're back again. Good.
Highly unprofessional.
No, that's fine. You know what? You could have had two kids walk in on you and then like a maid come in and grab them. So,
At least that would have been a viral sensation.
right?
Actually, you know what? I was thinking about this a couple of days ago because someone mentioned that. And it occurred to me that's only funny because it's TV. That happens
Yep.
to people on calls, on podcasts, and on those kind of things. That happens a lot. I listen to things like Daily Tech News Show, and things will fall off. Cats will sometimes just interrupt shows. People will drop stuff, and it happens all the time. It's just that there's a weird standard with, well, not weird. It's not surprising, but there's just a standard with TV that's like, this is TV. That's not supposed to happen. Whereas it does happen in every other circumstance.
Yeah,
It's just
it's definitely bizarre.
Yeah.
I think it's the same. Like, it's the same standard that's like, Hollywood is held to, not with their actors apparently, but with the quality of output they have in terms of final product, where you wouldn't expect a bunch of shaky footage randomly.
No.
Or in my case, a bunch of webcam dropped frames, which is really bizarre. So if I like shake my hand, you'll see that my webcam is being really blurry.
Yeah.
I don't know why it's doing it, but it's bizarre.
I used to get it with OBS all the time, and this was on. I haven't tried OBS properly, I don't think, since I got the new MacBook Pro.
Right.
But on my iMac, OBS would just. I tried doing a show with a friend where we would share YouTube videos and things, and we did similar to what you're doing, using OBS and Skype and virtual desktops and all that kind of stuff, and got it to look all right. It's just that the frame rate was about 15 frames a second, and that seemed to just be the recorded video, and it's just, I think it was just simply the iMac not being beefy enough, and it was a real shame because you're trying to show YouTube videos and things, and it's just completely jerky. It's not good.
Yeah, luckily I am aware of the fact that this isn't OBS, because Skype, like your webcam looks just fine. This is actually an issue with KVY cam, the webcam splitter.
Right.
Because if I were to turn this off and just make my webcam viewable via OBS, it would look fine. Sometimes this happens, sometimes it doesn't. KVY cam isn't exactly the most consistent of software, but it's the only webcam splitter I could find. So we're living with it, I guess.
Yeah.
If I look a little bit blurry, I'm sorry. If you're listening to this and you're like, what the hell is he on about? I'm sorry.
He looks fine. He looks fine, dear listener.
Yeah, I look fine.
Yeah.
Not that you can tell, but I look perfectly fine. Mostly sane, only mostly though.
I do get. I tell you what, I do get a 24-hour fault response SLA. That would be very useful.
Yes,
Because at the moment,
yes.
I'm aware that if I ring them up and say there's a problem with my broadband, they're just going to go, well, sucks to be you.
Right.
You're a home customer. We'll
You
get
also
to it when we get to it.
you also get a technician out like on within
Oh, yeah.
48 hours or something, providing
And
for free.
static IPs.
Yeah, and static IPs that you can purchase.
Except I might not want to do that unless I want to enter their beta program.
Yeah, apparently so. I hope it's out by now. I'm not sure. You'll have to ask.
Yeah. Well, my business can afford that. That's something to check out later. Anyway, let's do
Yes.
a show.
Let's so technology. So the reason we have Mark Steadman on, dear listener, and the reason I've been really nice with him, just in case you hadn't noticed yet, is because his service happens to host our podcast, and I'm
But
fully.
for how long?
But yeah, the question is how deep and scathing can I get with my jokes until he gets a little bit pissed off and just pulls the plug on my podcast. I'm worried that I might make a joke that hits a little too close to home, so I'm not going to make any jokes.
It's all in the terms of service. Yeah,
I can just
Mark only has a limited sense of humour.
I read those extensively.
It's more than I did. That's a joke. That's a joke.
There's actually, you know what? This cycles really well into After On because there's the Euler.
Oh, yes.
And I guess that's worth discussing real quick. So if you haven't read After On, it's a book by Rob Reed. It's quite a long book, I'll be honest, like 570 pages or something. It is highly worth it if you're even remotely techie, which if you're listening to this, you probably are. Unless you're my mum, in which case, hi mum. Just kidding, she doesn't listen to this. She's actually like, every time, my mum is the exact opposite of constructive. Like, I'll be like, hey mum, I made this video, I'm really proud of it, do you mind giving it a watch? She'll be like, not really, it's just not my thing. I'm like, but mum, I made it. And she's like, yeah, no.
Aww.
So I can't even like, you know when you're like, oh yeah, I've got like 12 subscribers, they're all alternative accounts my mum made. I can't even make that joke.
Oh, if it helps, my mum doesn't know how to use YouTube, but she.
My mum is fully aware of YouTube.
Oh well, there you go. I mean, it swings and roundabouts. Like I think my mum knows what YouTube is, but I don't think she would know. She would think to know how to use it. I think when I used to do a live show, and they listened once or twice. I think when I told them I had someone I was excited to have on as a guest, who was a comedian, they were quite interested and they listened to the whole thing, which meant that my mum got to hear me drop the C-bomb because it was pertinent to a conversation.
It's also something that's a lot bigger deal in the US than it is in the UK.
Yeah, absolutely. Although, yeah, I think it depends on who you speak to, because I think I've heard some people say like, the British just throw out the C-bomb like it's nothing. It's like, well, no. It still does have potency, just it's not quite as beyond the pale as it is in America.
Yes, definitely.
But yeah, like you can't just go all right and drop it then. It doesn't. Yeah.
but yeah, so
technology.
I can't even claim my mum listens to this. Which is,
oh, dude.
I have to I've had to trick her into watching one of my videos before, where we have a smart TV in the kitchen, so my mum will be like in the middle of making dinner, and I'll load it onto the TV. I'm like, oh mum, what a coincidence. Let's sit and watch this together.
You know what you should do? Because you can have just a normal YouTube video as a pre-roll ad to another one. So you should create a really super highly targeted AdWords campaign that is just going to find your mum, and you could call it Your Mum because that's hilarious. And it literally just and so anytime she watches a video, your face comes up first.
Oh, that'd be great.
And you can start with, "Hi, Mum."
Oh, you know what? I now have to do it. I can't not do that.
That's a project. Can you do? Yeah. Is there a way that you can make a little video and say, put a little test in and say, hey mum, you never watch any of my videos, so I just wanted to say, if you get this, text me the word banana.
Right.
And then that's it. And then if you get a text from your mum saying banana, then she's seen the video. I think this is quite an interesting project. I think you should do it.
I can't not do it now.
No, you're bound to it. I want to hear results.
Oh, this is. I think it'll be hilarious. I think we should. I'm gonna make it happen. I've decided.
Yeah.
You know.
Excellent.
Let's talk Eulers real quick.
Mm.
So After On, great book, quite a long read, but definitely worth it. 22 hours worth of Audible, just in case you're wondering. Has Leo Laporte in
Very
it.
entertaining though. Very very well read for the most part, and most of the narrators do a really good job. And full disclosure, I'm sort of slightly internet friends ish with one of the guys who does a couple of segments on there.
Right.
The wonderful, lovely Tom Merritt, who's the loveliest man.
Yes, Tom Merritt is great.
So charming. So he does a couple of spots in there, which is why I heard of the book.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a very, very entertaining listen, and there is a lot of stuff about Euless.
So the premise being that and there's a website called
Flutter.
no. Sorry, I was going on the terms of service thing.
Sorry.
Is that it? Yeah, so it's tosdr.org, which is terms of service didn't read. .org. And what it does is it ranks websites by their terms of service. And it gives you highlights from their terms of service.
Brilliant.
So I'm on this right now, tosdr.org, and I can see, Google is rated a C on their things. So the thumbs up is that they have partial archives of their terms, right? So you can see all of their old terms of services. However, they collect your device fingerprint. They track you on other websites. Google can use your content for all existing and future services, whatever. We go down to something like DuckDuckGo, which is a class A because it has zero tracking. All the way down to things like Yahoo, which has, down thumbs on the fact that you must provide a legal name upon registration and that they can change their terms at any time with their discretion without notice to the user. But without notice to the user is the bit that gets me every time.
Yes. Crikey. No, thank you. I was trying to see if I could get to our TOS, but I don't think I've got a page for it. It actually comes up when you sign up. I don't think I've got a dedicated page for the terms. I have got for the privacy policy, but I don't think I've got one for the terms because I was really curious to see, because there's a browser extension for this thing, which is really interesting.
Oh, is that? I didn't even notice that.
Yeah, so I was interested to see if it does some sort of linguistic analysis on the fly, or whether it's just checking it with a database. Because I've had one or two comments about my TOS, and I'm always interested in ways to help make sure that people don't feel uncomfortable. Because as an example, there's a note in there saying that other people can use your content, and what that means is other people can download your content.
Yes.
There's no explicit or implicit right to say people can do things with that content. No, no one else owns it. We don't own it. Podiant, the company, doesn't own it. You own the content, but it has to be made available for people to access. And I think because it wasn't explicitly said that other people aren't permitted to do anything with it, which actually, in all fairness, might not be what you want, because many people put podcasts out under Creative Commons. Yeah. And so it wouldn't be appropriate for the terms of service to say people can't touch your content or do anything with it, because you might explicitly want people to be able to do that. So yeah.
And then the ones that, so the changing terms without your permission or without you being notified.
Yeah, without your knowledge is scary.
Kind of sketchy.
Yeah. We don't do that. We don't do that because we have an automated system that if we update the terms, then it sends a thing. So yeah.
Perfect. The other one, and there are two more that kind of terrify me. A lot of image hosting services take ownership of, they own anything you upload onto it.
Ooh.
And then there are a few that, so it's phrased differently on different websites. So for example, on Xfire, you can't delete your account. However, on Delicious, it's phrased as you have, and I quote, no right to leave the service.
Oh, that stings.
Right?
Oh, that's got me right in the legals. That's awful.
So once you've signed up, you have no right to leave.
It's the Hotel California of web services. Show title.
You're right.
Wow. God, that's awful.
Yeah, it is terrifying.
Yeah. Oh. Bleh.
And then there's things like, may retain your delay. So this is also one that gets me. So for example, in this case, couch surfing may retain your data after deactivation for legitimate business purposes, which basically means they'll just sell them on.
For legitimate business purposes.
Yeah. What's an illegitimate business purpose is my question.
Well, that sounds like every mafia don I've ever heard.
Right.
Like, I'm a legitimate businessman.
Yeah.
What are you in? No, not what is it they always say? They're in waste disposal. That's it. Yeah. Oh no, this is not good. This is a great website.
Yes. So you can type in the name of a website, I believe.
Yeah.
Yep, and it'll let you know. It'll give you like the highlights of your terms of service.
Just the fun bits.
Yeah, just the fun bits, because we really need it. Let's be honest here.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the generic down to can remove your content at any time and without prior notice, which YouTube really should have exercised to their fullest extent with the Logan Paul situation, but that's not really tech. We'll gloss over that. This has been a very wandering episode, I'll be honest.
Yeah, no, I'm down. Yeah, I haven't seen. It's like many things on the internet. I haven't seen the Logan Paul thing, but I've heard everything I need to hear about it, so I don't need to see it.
Yeah.
I already know what my opinion is, and that's having listened to other people describe it and go, yeah, no, I don't need to see that.
Yeah, that's what terrifies me. What terrifies me most is when you notice that it had actually been like until the rest of the internet caught wind of it. It was a relatively well-received video. All of his fans were loving it. It had like 300,000 likes or something before the rest of the internet caught on. And were like, what the hell is this guy doing?
I can't be too, strident about that, because I think if I was that age, and that's the thing, like, I really, really am being careful as I get older to not be the kids today about things, and know when there are things that I don't understand about a younger generation, just go, you know what, I don't get it, and it's not my business to get it. It's not for me. Radio 1 isn't for me anymore. The stuff about YouTube where you've got all these YouTube stars with smash cuts and various things, and hi guys, let's like and subscribe, like that isn't for me. And so I tried to sort of, I've just broken my pop shield. I got so excited. I got animated in it.
You love Logan Paul so much, but you just karate chop that pop shield.
Yeah, there we are. That made everything fine. So I don't get excised about those things too much, but like I can kind of see being, I don't know, 16, 17, 18 and being fascinated by that video and not seeing the ramifications of it. Of course, you're going to see that and think that's amazing. I was into some dark things when I was younger, or I was fascinated by things. And there were also things I was disgusted by. To go like super dark for a moment, I won't go graphic, but as an idea, back when we were on higher terror alert, I worked for a business that, for whatever reason, one of the guys in the business had on his possession a video of something awful being done to a British soldier who was taken hostage. And I heard the video. It was in the news at the time, I think, what had happened. And I heard a bit of the video, and I was 21, 22 at the time, and I'd heard this video, and they were kind of watching it in fascination, and I had to leave the room and just go somewhere else for a bit. So like I have that limit, but there are still, when you're younger, I think you don't think of the ramifications, and so I can't really have a go at kids for being fascinated by that video. It doesn't make it right to put it up because he's a little bit older and he should know better, or he should have had people to say to him, that's not okay. But that's where it's on him, or his quote unquote team. There's me getting excited again. But yeah, I can't blame the kids on that one, if I'm honest.
Yeah, and yeah, no, I'm not blaming the kids. It was more of a like, it was interesting to see the culture around that video, because his viewing demographic is primarily like, it's not even 16, 17, 18. It's like 12 and 13. It was more concerning to me that it was anything else. And this guy is so clearly surrounded by people who just say yes to everything he suggests, so that they can be in that clique. That no one went, wait a second, we're filming a dead body whilst making jokes, and there's a picture of him like in the thumbnail of this video. That might be a bit off, like just a little bit.
Yeah, it's also, I mean, it's not just that. There's one thing which is a dead body, but there's the other thing of it being a suicide. I think that adds something. I think just going and seeing a dead body is something, to put on a video that's watched by 12, 13, 14-year-olds is still inappropriate, but is different from, there's something even more personal about someone who's committed suicide and you're showing that video because that it's because of that, because you went to this place where this thing happens, because you wanted to find something shocking, and then so I didn't know who this guy was before the video happened. I don't know who most people are on YouTube, like that part of YouTube that is like where there are celebrities. The only YouTube celebrity I really know is MKBHD.
Right.
And I watch most of his videos, and he's still got a little bit of that, you'll find the comments just below that like button, or that kind of the language of YouTube, because he's a younger guy as well, and he's grown up with that, and he's been making videos since,
he's been making videos forever.
Yeah, he was literally a child when he was making them. Which is amazing, and he does an amazing job, and I really like his. I appreciate his style, but he's the most YouTube person I can think of in the people I know. Apart from there's the Australian girl who I think she's Australian, and her thing is that. Oh, and then you know what? I'm not gonna go there.
What I will say is Marquez's first video was 9 years ago, so he was most certainly a child. And little known fact, I'm not sure if you're aware of this, Twit tried to pick him up. So Leo Laporte tried to hire him, I want to say like 3 or 4 years ago.
Right.
And they couldn't. They just, they weren't able to offer him what he's worth, I guess, as a solo YouTube creator. And they discussed this in an episode of it was like mentioned in passing, so they only spent a couple of minutes on it, but I found it really interesting because they were saying how YouTubers are becoming brands in their own right. And when they tried to hire Marquez like 3 or 4 years ago, whenever this was, they just couldn't offer him they couldn't offer him enough to make him stop making his own YouTube videos, not because they wanted him to stop, but because they wanted him to put all of his attention into Twit. I
only discovered him because again of one of the early days of Daily Tech News Show, and he's only ever done it once where Tom Merritt had Marquez on, and that was my first ever introduction to the guy, and just Tom Merritt speaking sort of so highly of him, and hearing that this guy's obviously very young. This was probably 2014. And so it could well have been. I wonder if it was around that time, because obviously Merritt was formerly of Twit, who are now trying to sue Twitter.
Oh my god!
There's a news story from the week.
And then what's even funnier is Leo Laporte and Jack Dorsey knew each other before Twitter went live, right? Before Twitter became a big deal. And
it would have been back in the Odeo days.
So, and this has been mentioned a couple of times, again, mostly in passing, but Leo Laporte has said in an episode of Twitter before, he asked Jack Dorsey, like, what the hell, why'd you call it Twitter? You knew Twitter exists, and it's a thing I'm doing, why'd you call it Twitter? And he turns around and goes, to be completely honest with you, I didn't think either of these would go anywhere.
Yeah. No, yeah. Have you read? I'm gonna have to find the book now. There is a wonderful book on the first, 8 years of Twitter.
I haven't.
And
no.
it's told in the style of a murder mystery. It's written like a novel, but it's the complete factual thing of Jack and Ev and Beers and all those people, and it is great. It's really entertaining. The bits at the beginning are a bit dull because they're getting into sort of, they've got to introduce everyone, as characters and so that's a little bit, but then it gets really, really interesting. Actually, it starts really well because it starts in sort of movie fashion with like a scene, and then the whole thing flashes back, and so you've got this, this stuff hanging over, and it's written really dramatically. Hatching Twitter. I've just remembered the name. I've been searching here on Amazon trying to find it, but it's called Hatching Twitter, and it's written by Nick Bilton and Daniel May. Yeah. And I got the audiobook because that's how I roll, and it was really, really good.
I will give that
I highly recommend it. Yeah.
Or listen, if I'm completely honest.
Yeah, exactly. On this sort of along the lines of After On, like it kind of weirdly fits because it's so entertainingly written.
Right. Yeah, I'll definitely give that a listen.
Yeah, because a lot of those things are quite dry. Like the Steve Jobs book, as fascinating as it is a lot drier. So yeah.
So Marquez is currently 24, which means he would have been 15 at the time of creation of his YouTube channel, and about 20 when Twitch tried to pick him up.
Sweet summer child.
Oh, 20.
I'm not old enough to be his dad, but I'm old enough to be the uncool uncle.
Oh man. But yeah, I've just I hadn't heard about this Twitter thing, and I've just found it. Well, like it took more than 30 seconds of Googling.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it was actually between Leo Laporte and co-founder Evan Williams, who were friends, not Jack Dorsey. My mistake. So Williams and Laporte acknowledged that Twitter and Twit were aware of the conflict between both written contract and oral agreement, as the trademarks were quite similar. However, they both agreed that because the two products were so different, they'd allow each other to coexist, with the understanding that Twitter would remain a text-based platform and Twit would be the podcast, audio, video thing that it is, with Twitter moving from text to its own premium video content and their own, they're hosting like NFL, I've seen them, and showing American football and stuff like that.
From what I understand, their worry wasn't in the stuff where they've bought licenses. It's the fact that they want to develop their own original video. That's the thing that got his backup, because they did the NFL thing 18 months ago, I think, and I think that was fine. It wasn't until Twitter started branching out into original content that's when that started things flaring up.
Yeah, so I completely see where Leo Laporte, I'm sure it wasn't him, personally writing this. I see where.
Probably was.
It was probably him voicing his concerns, but I'm sure someone probably mentioned it to him and was like, "Hey, but just so you know, Twitter is kind of going into their own stuff, and you should maybe get them to rein it in a bit." So, but yeah, I completely understand where they're coming from.
You see, maybe it's personal bias, but I don't. I think it feels very much like a Laporte thing, and I think he should simmer down.
Yeah,
I don't know.
It's For me, to be fair, I've never seen anyone confuse Twitter and Twitter before.
No, no.
I have done so myself because I've abbreviated Twitter to Twit before. So that, I guess, I don't know if that qualifies, but if that does, then...
I don't know. I don't mean, and I don't mean this to be needlessly sarcastic, and I'm not. I'd say this not to be unkind to Twit, but I think that the people who know about Twit also know about Twitter and know that they are two different things.
Yes.
So I don't see, and that may be naive, and that may be coming at it the wrong way, but I think if you know what Twit is already, you also know what Twitter is because you are enough in that world to know what Twitter is, and so I think you know the distinction. Whether there's a genuine worry that there might be a brand confusion from the Twitter side, I don't know. I don't buy it as a genuine brand confusion. There's a lot of things, companies do this a lot. The Olympics, you can't use the word Olympics because they say people will think it's official. So no.
Yes.
No,
yeah.
If you're having the rubber band Olympics, no one is going to think or care that this is an official Olympic event. But you're not even allowed to say Twitter, rubber band Olympics, this is not an Olympic event. You just can't use the word Olympics. And I think when it gets into that, I understand companies have to defend their trademarks. That's a legal thing you have to do, because when you get a legitimate complaint, if you haven't adequately defended your trademark in the past, then you can't suddenly start getting on your high horse when there's a legitimate one. That's from what I understand. But
yes,
I think there's a limit. I think there's a limit.
Yeah, and it's not like I just did the test on this. It's not like you go into Google, type in Twit, and it goes, "Did you mean Twitter?" So yeah. I think it'd be difficult to get that confusion there, but maybe it is that thing where they know that they kind of have to, because if they don't, then and something comes along, they'll go. I don't know. We'll see.
I think part of it also is a lot of the reportage that I've heard is just by probably coincidence or whatever, it is by ex-Twit people,
right?
And so they're trying to be impartial, but two different shows. One of them was very impartial and just said, "Look, this is the thing." And I think actually, again, this was Tom Merritt. I think went out of his way to distance himself from that and had no opinion on it, which is the right thing to do. And then a different show, which is hosted by people who were formerly of Twit, obviously had and were fired by Twit, I should say, actually. Obviously had a very different take on it. But yeah, I saw it and I rolled my eyes, I'll be honest. But then I'm not a massive Twit fan.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I listened to a few shows back in the day.
Right.
And then, yeah, I don't know. For whatever reason, often we have our camps and tribes, and Twit just isn't one of mine.
Yeah, I think the thing that keeps me going back to it is more their recurring guests, as opposed to what they cover. Because especially, Owen JJ Stone comes to mind. That guy is hilarious as a guest. So I'm also subscribed to his podcast. I just love hearing his voice, to be honest.
Yeah.
Like I tweeted out, I think it was last week. I was like, the day we get Owen JJ Stone on as a guest will be the day we've made it. So he is hilarious and has a way with, he isn't a tech journalist as such. So he usually comes at it with a more consumer point of view, which is really useful because we end up in an echo chamber within the tech sphere specifically. Because I remember when Apple first announced the iPhone 7 and they dropped the headphone jack, I remember mainstream media going crazy when it was announced that it had no headphone jack. But I'd known, and most of the tech community had known because there'd been rumors since January that they were dropping the headphone jack. So we'd kind of made our peace with it.
Yeah.
But mainstream media just didn't know. And that was the moment where I went, wait a second, I am not a standard
Yes,
tech user.
you're not. Yeah, standard consumer. You are. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you're a cut above. And my tech listening has gone up a notch in the last year, just because I dove heavily into the Relay FM world,
Right.
and so there's a lot of Relay FM stuff that I now listen to, and John Gruber's talk show, and an ATP, which to my massive chagrin I'm a relative newcomer to, yeah, so like often you're hearing the same stories a lot of the time, but even when you're not, you are keeping sometimes days, if not like literal weeks ahead. I mean, my dad talked to me about the what's the name of the latest the processor bug? It's the marketing name they've given it.
Meltdown Inspector.
Spectre, that's it. So my dad was talking to me. He said,
"Turn my light on, so keep talking. I can hear you."
Okay, yes, that's all right. So the BBC said, my dad had this conversation. Hey, BBC said that Apple have got a problem with all their machines, and I sort of said, well, no, not really. It's a problem with all it's oversimplifying. It's a problem with all computers. And he said, well, the BBC just say it's Apple. That's really irresponsible. Why? And it turns out that Apple just came out in front of it in a way that other tech companies in the UK didn't. And so they issued a statement saying, we've got fixes for this, which the BBC read as, Apple have discovered problems with their computers, but it's okay, they've fixed them. And it's like, that's not the story. The story is that basically all Intel computers have got this problem, and it just so happens that Apple have come out and said that they're ahead of it. And I was really surprised. And so, I was already about a week ahead of the story. And so my dad got halfway through telling it, and I was like, hey, that's sort of wrong. This is actually the case. And that's because of listening to, mostly Daily Tech News Show, but also Download or one of the other relay shows.
Yeah, and I don't usually defend Apple, right? Mm-hmm. I'm not a big fan of Apple. However, and I mentioned it, so a week before last, we had an episode specifically dedicated to Meltdown Inspector because there was a lot of misinformation out there. And I felt that was important that we just kind of sit down and talk about what they were. And, it was also, we didn't have a guest on that week because I spent the week preparing for, this week and next week where we have, heavy hitters as such. So I wanted it to be a bit more toned down. So it was only about 40 minutes. But I made sure, I got as much of my facts straight as I could. And that BBC article had me defending Apple in a way I've never done before. Because I had that exact same thing where, if you scroll down to the article, the last paragraph is like, oh, by the way, it also affects every other device.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, this is ridiculous.
It's an oddly sensational article from the BBC.
Yeah.
And, not wrong, but misleading, and that's very unlike the BBC. I will defend a lot of the BBC, probably less so as I get older than I used to, but that's not an okay thing to do because it is misleading because it makes people think, well, I'm not going to buy, fine, it could be Apple, it could be any other company, but to say, I'm not going to buy their stuff because they've got this problem, and it's like that's playing favorites or seeming to play favorites in a very strange way.
Yeah, it was.
I thought it was odd.
It just rubbed me the wrong way, to be completely honest. Like saying about it was just so. Like, you've really had to stretch to come to the conclusion that it was an Apple issue, right?
Either that, or it was so badly researched, and someone just read a press release and did a little bit of research afterwards. But yeah, to not frame it in the correct way that all computers. No, I know I'm simplifying again, but all computers have this problem. Yeah. And Apple have come out and said, that's the story, is that one tech company was a little bit ahead of the game in addressing a problem that faces everyone. The story is not a tech company has a problem with all their computers. Oh, by the way, actually other computers do as well. Like, yeah, very odd.
It was, I just found it peculiar, for lack of a better word. Mm-hmm. So I do want to pivot, however, into into Podiant because we are almost now in, and I have some questions I want to ask you about both yourself and Podiant.
Okay.
at this
I
point.
hope I get them right. I really hope I get them right.
Right? Like, so what date did you start Podiant? Right? I have it's like Who Wants to Be a Millionaire style, where I give you 4 options, you have to pick the right one. But no, so the reason, I wanted to do this was because, as I mentioned at the start of this, we are hosted on Podiant, and I felt like it'd be a good opportunity for me to, get to know you, in the sense that it's useful to know the people who host your services. And then also because Podiant is relatively new. It was heavily scolded by Reddit. Less so now, luckily.
I'll be honest. I mean, I didn't read everything, but I think we got off pretty lightly, actually.
Yeah, it was.
By terms of Reddit.
It was. Yeah, actually, to be fair, from Reddit as a whole, when you remember that the Donald is a subreddit that exists, you're right. Yeah, you got off quite well.
I mean, again, like I've been in the Podiant subreddit. I haven't been in our podcasts for a while.
Right.
There was some anger. There was mainly from one person in the Podiant subreddit when it was announced, because you know what, we should actually tell the story of why that is, but I'll let you finish first. We should give some context to why that happened. But yes, I'll let you carry on. Sorry.
Yeah. So basically, there was a lot of I don't want to say negativity, but it was definitely negativity.
Yeah, well, it would be unfair to call it negativity, because they were right to be upset.
Yeah, it was. So it was initially questioning more than anything. I was like, everyone was very confused, because I remember when I first heard about Podiant, and part of the thing was that it was free at the time, right? It was.
Yeah. So should I give some context?
So what? That's probably the best way to do it. If you describe Podiant as it was, as it is, and then we can get into it.
So it was founded as a labour of love. It's a podcast hosting service that was really meant for people who love the medium, and care about the medium, and also understand that lots of shows need support, and as in, that people understand that things like Patreon exist to help creators get supported who might have niche audiences, and that was kind of the philosophy behind it. And I don't regret what the choices we made. I do regret maybe how Podiant was positioned at the beginning. So we had a free tier, and we had basically it was an unlimited service, because it was my belief at the time that enough people would understand the value of the service that would help. So basically, those that could afford to would support those who couldn't. That was the idea. And, naive, whatever, wide-eyed, certainly optimistic. I think it would be cutting it short to call it naive. It wasn't, it was an experiment, and I'd always said, I was upfront as I could be with everyone whenever they asked about this, is Podiant going to be around in a year? And I would say, honestly, like, it's hard to say that about any business. So I'm not going to say I'm not going to promise you anything. I'm going to promise you that if there are any changes, I will keep you well aware, keep you fully abreast of those changes, and give you a chance to to move on if you're unhappy with what those changes mean. And that's a thing that happened. So in October, as the service grew, we got up to about 1,600 podcasts that were being hosted on Podiant, which is more than some of our more well-known competitors, according to the iTunes scraping that I did a while back, which was for a different purpose. It wasn't to find out the competition. It was legitimately for something else. But it just so happened that I was able to do a little bit of digging around and go, okay, well, one of the companies to which I think we are could be most closely compared in terms of size and type of service and price had nearly half the number that we had. But the point is that most of those, the vast majority, were being hosted for free and not contributing in any way, which is, again, sort of fine, because I didn't make any demands. I said, look, you will get extra stuff if you do help out. There's a donation level where you don't get anything, but you're kicking in to say we appreciate the service. And actually people did. There was a small number of people who did that. They put in their $5 a month to say we appreciate this. This is all we can. Pardon me. This is all we can give.
Yeah.
But then there were people who went for the higher tier. As the service grew, it quickly started to become a little bit not untenable, but it certainly the performance of the service was degraded quite a lot, and it was often going down. I was dealing with pingdom alerts and trying to spin things back up again, and there were all sorts of things. I've made all sorts of changes and updates to the system since to help mitigate most of that, but a lot of it was simply when we started, when there were people who assumed that I was an idiot for trying to come up with a service like this and offer a free tier. They assumed that it was all to do with bandwidth and storage costs, and fact is that stuff's pretty cheap. If you go to the right place, bandwidth, even across CDNs and things, not that expensive. What is expensive is thinking, and it's not necessarily expensive in money, but it is expensive in time, and that is the crucial thing, because money can only get you so far with this. I mean, money would have, like huge amounts of money, would have solved this problem, but basically the throughput that we were experiencing gave us a bottleneck, and that bottleneck, you can't necessarily just add more machines to a load balancer. Doesn't always work like that. There are other bottlenecks that are involved, and that's that was part of the problem that we had. When you've got 1,600 RSS feeds, not all of them active, but certainly, let's say 9 to 1,200 active RSS feeds that are being pinged by various apps all the time, and those RSS feeds are large and take time to deliver. The problem isn't bandwidth. The problem is time, because if you've got X number of machines that are in charge of delivering RSS feeds which are big and slow, then those connections are being hung up, and the servers then can't help anyone else because they're busy. And that's the problem, and that's why money doesn't just solve that problem. You actually have to rethink it. And so I did some thinking, and I basically figured out, look, the best way to solve this, because this is going to be an ongoing problem as we grow more and more, is to say we're going to have to change the business model. And so I wrote to people in, I think, the end of October, might have been slightly earlier, and said, here's the thing. Thank you, everyone who supported Podiant, but sort of basically not enough people did. And so we have to change our business model and more carefully or more adequately explain the spirit in which the free offer was intended. And I don't blame people for using Podiant and not giving anything back, because you offer something for free. It doesn't matter if you can pay for it. Why optionally pay for it when you can get it for free? Like, you'd be kind of dumb not to. So they were taking advantage of the service, but I can't blame them for doing that, because the offer was made for them to do so. And so what we did is actually add qualifications to the offer. So the same thing still applies, still free, unlimited hosting, but only for those podcasts that qualify. And what qualification basically means is, can we justify hosting your podcast for free? Is it one of two things? Could you actually afford to host it? And we found that a lot of people, that is the case. They can afford to host it. And so they pay for it. If they can't afford to host it, then we look at, is it suitably super niche, or does it have a community benefit that you wouldn't justify necessarily paying $12.99 a month because it's a hobby or it's a labor of love, and you're not going to get advertising money for it. As much as I'm not a religious man at all, we've got a few podcasts that are people delivering sermons, as in not televangelism. They are recordings of sermons being given at local churches,
right?
And they're disseminated for people who can't make it to church. And as much as I'm not a fan of religion, that's a wonderful use of the platform, and I'm proud of the fact that we do that. So that might go out to 14 people in a parish. And that's really useful if those 14 people want to still hear their local sermon from their pastor or whatever, and wouldn't be able to otherwise because the service wouldn't be able to afford, that absolutely I'm down with. And so it's things like that. And it's things like, there's a podcast that's hosted in and about it's all about a Hungarian prison and various things around that prison in Hungary, and it's in Hungarian, and that's fascinating. We've got, there's all sorts of shows on there that wouldn't necessarily find a home otherwise, and so I'm delighted. So we have a community review program that my partner in this, Brendan Hutchins, the Podiant community advocate, him and I, mostly him, sift through the applications, and I will say I'm quite proud of the fact that he's a lot more lenient than I am, and I'm happy for that to be the case, because it keeps, because obviously I've got, to a degree, I've got my eye on the financial ball,
Right.
or my eye on the purse strings, whereas he's actually looking more at the genuine community case, and so he might let things through that I might not, and I'm perfectly happy with that because I trust his judgment. And it makes me feel like the decisions are made a little bit more independently of the finance, which is great. And so I'm really pleased with how that turned out. And if I'm going to pat myself on the back for this, and plenty of Reddit will say you shouldn't pat yourself on the back for anything, it will be that this was communicated well, and it was communicated in a timely manner. The deadline, weirdly enough, is today, of when podcasts needed to make a decision, and there's nothing has suddenly disappeared. No one's data's been deleted. It was just, from this point on, a decision has to be made. So this was, back in October, email sent out, and then I said I'm going to sit on Reddit for an hour on Sunday night when the email was sent out, and on Monday night Monday night my time anyway, to answer your questions, because you will have them. And people did, and for the most part there was a sort of a resignation and an understanding that, okay, this couldn't necessarily last. Disappointment all round, mostly, and a little bit of anger, not much on mainly from one person who I had to say, please don't yell at the people I'm working with. You can yell at me, but when you start yelling at people who I work with, then don't do that, please. But it's again, if you're angry, be angry at me, and that's fine. And I took that, and we saw a bit of a flood and of people moving away, which is kind of the point, as harsh as that sounds.
Yeah.
Got interesting notes from Todd Cochran of Blueberry, who was getting an influx of people, who was complaining because he was getting too much new business, which is fine, but
that's always the weirdest of things to complain about.
Yeah, he just didn't like the way he was getting lots of new business, but that's fine. And he talked about us on his podcast, and he was, a little bit sneery and a little bit sort of, turns out free isn't a business model. Great original joke. And that's fine. He's a famously grumpy man, and that's fine. And there's, we've funneled plenty of business over to a favourite competitor of mine, because they're lovely people. A company called Pinecast.
I was going to ask.
Really nice.
I was going to ask about those guys, because they seem to be, from what I've seen at least, to be one of the more popular ones that people have gone over to from Podiant. From what I've seen.
Part of that will be because I will tell people to go over to Pinecast, but also, there are plenty of people who know about Pinecast in its own right. I'm not doing them any big favors or anything. There's plenty of people who know. One of the guys who built Pinecast works at Stripe in his day job, so he's not an idiot by any stretch. They know their onions over there, and I used to use them, which is one of the reasons. And I will happily champion smaller companies that bigger than me, but smaller than than the average. They're a small team, and they're good at what they do. it's just, Podiant. If anyone's listening, thinking, well, okay, well, why don't we just use? Why wouldn't we just use Pinecast then? And it's just because trying to tackle the same problem from different angles, basically. But so yeah, there's plenty of people who went over there, and since then, just helping people with their applications and letting shows through, and we'll be opening up applications for our community hosting service again soon, because it's contingent on the number of professional subscribers that we have.
Right.
And that'll be opening again soon, because I think the balance is getting redressed. And so, it's onwards and upwards for Podiant. And I think the fact is, what, Reddit may have been loudly burbling away to itself. I couldn't give a monkeys, because the people who like Podiant and who carry on using it and have upgraded or haven't, or have stayed with the community system, even the people who have moved away, the people I deal with, even when I'm dealing with support, they really like Podiant. And so I couldn't give them. It sounds arrogant, and it probably does sound very arrogant. I really couldn't care what people who don't use Podiant think about Podiant.
Yeah.
Because I'm confident. And this is coming from someone who's not confident. I'm not a confident person. I'm not one of those. I'm not strident. I can't walk into a room and be like, I own this space. I can be gregarious on a podcast or in a stream, but you come and meet me face to face, and I'm just like, I'm no good to anyone.
Is that an offer? Because I'll just turn up.
Yeah, that's fine. You can turn up and I'll not look you in the eye. You can turn up and we'll avoid eye contact for an hour while we drink coffee.
On the subject of coffee, sorry, wait.
Yeah, no, please.
Let's do this first. I'll come back to that after you finished.
Okay. So like, as a person who's not like super confident, it's the fact that people vociferously tell me how pleased they are with Podiant, and sometimes that's just the support, sometimes it's the interface, sometimes it's whatever. That makes me feel quite secure in the fact that Reddit can chatter away to itself if it wants, and slag us off and call me all the names under the sun and tell me that I pulled the rug under them. And again, people are entitled to be angry. Of course they are, because they did have the rug pulled under them, not through malicious means, but through an experiment that didn't work, that didn't pan out. And so that's fine. Go at it, Reddit. Come at me, bro.
And you know what? You also had the option to not have that community option, right? Yes. You could have just said, you know what, everyone has to pay. And if Reddit was, I think part of the lynch mob is always, oh my god, I can't believe someone's trying to make money, right? How dare they? I should be rich. Everyone else doesn't deserve any money, right? And if that's the point of view they're coming from, then clearly that isn't the point of view you're going from, because you could have just gone, you know what, everyone has to pay. And then you could have given them, a week's notice and gone, you either start paying in a week, or we delete everything. And then you end up with people who end up, panic buying because they need to keep their podcast live at least long enough for it to be able to switch over to somewhere else and all of that. So to be fair to you, you did, more than what was expected of you, in my opinion, at least.
I appreciate that. I think we did, as much as we could to try and, because the fact is, like I said at the beginning, it's a labor of love. It's not a hobby project. It's a professional endeavor, but it is a labor of love. And it's a labor of love because I care about the industry and I love the industry. I love podcasting, and specifically the way we deliver audio in a means that is, it doesn't require special technology. There's no walled garden. You don't have to have the right app. You just have to have an RSS reader, or just use a website, and it's all that kind of stuff that isn't Spotify, that isn't Audible. As much as I love Audible, it isn't those walled garden services, and it's those things that make me love the medium. And it's partly that love that made me want to make sure that those people who really needed us weren't left out in the cold. There's some wonderful shows on there on Podiant that I'm really happy exist, and one of them was a real surprise that there's a actually I shouldn't give the specific name of the show because it would be unfair to reveal who pays for Podiant and who doesn't.
Right.
But there was a specific podcast that's really niche and really fascinating as a topic, and it's from a person who isn't a white male, talking about stuff that is incongruent with where they live, and
Right.
to hear that person actually upgraded when they had the option to continue, because I would have approved an application from them because I already knew the podcast and I thought it was a great addition to the platform, and a great service to listeners that this thing existed. But the person went and upgraded, and I was surprised when I saw the name pop into Slack as one of the professional subscribers. I was like, oh, I would have given you free hosting. But you didn't apply for it, so I can only give it to people who apply. But like, if you'd applied, I would have given it to you. But that person saw enough value in the service to want to upgrade, and that was hugely gratifying. And so overall, the experience has been positive, and I can say that because the people who've moved, the people who move away, for the most part, are just like, look, I do like the service, I just can't afford that. That's just a bit rich for me, and I'm like, that's absolutely fine. And those experiences have been really positive. So, I pay a lot of money to have an instant support system in place because that's one of the things that is important to me. So anyway, I've babbled away a lot. Let's talk about coffee.
Let's talk about coffee. But what I will say really, really quickly before we do is that I've also yet to see someone have a bad experience with this customer service. Like, I'm yet to see someone complain about that specifically. Mm-hmm. Like, I've seen people complain about other aspects of Podiant that, and usually it's people who don't actually use Podiant, ironically enough, right? They're always the ones who complain. But I'm yet to see someone go, I said X, Y, Z, and then didn't get reply, or they said something demeaning, or, whatever their complaint could be. Mm-hmm. I'm yet to see that. And that's usually what I use as a sign of a good product or service when it goes wrong, because you know what? Inevitably it will.
Software's a living thing.
Yeah, and just today I gave you 2 issues. I told you 2 issues I had, and they've been noted and they'll be fixed soon. But it, and the fact you're on this show, I think, proves that you're quite easy to get a hold of, right? If someone has a genuine issue. Mm-hmm. And so that is credit in itself, and that's at least what I try to use as my barometer for how good a service is. If their support is great and constantly in touch, and I think Essential has done a good job of this with their bi-weekly, which has now become monthly AMAs on Reddit, where every other week, and as of 2018, once a month, they would do an Ask Me Anything. And, sometimes it was Andy Rubin, but usually it wasn't, and it was a couple of other people. And they would just go in there and do that thing where they just, answer any question that anyone has. And, the Essential phone when it came out, wasn't that great, but they've dropped the price like $500, and they've fixed the horrible camera software, and now it's an amazing phone for the price. So yeah, it's that I try to use that as my barometer, and I think it served me well so far. However, coffee.
Yeah.
So in preparation for this episode, because I knew, believe it or not, I was aware of the fact it was coming up. I tried to integrate the Snappy-Tech podcast into everything. It's moments like these where I'm glad I record in FLV.
Yes.
So our stream is back up. So if you're watching this, I should be back again. Let me just make sure of that. My computer just shut down.
Oh, wow.
And when I say shut down, let me rephrase that. My computer just crashed. It didn't shut down. It just died.
Oh, no.
I looked at my thing and I was like, oh, the power light is off. So I clicked it and the computer came back on. Really bizarre. I went to click on a link and, instead of the link being clicked, it just poop. So
pooped it.
That was odd. Right.
Yes, indeed.
So, I was talking about fully integrating myself. One of the things being coffee. Now, I find coffee really intriguing. It's if you're not aware, what it basically is it lets people. Well, I know you're aware. I meant for audience.
Yeah, I'm with you.
I could, as I said, I
understand
probably should have. I'm pretty sure Mark knows what coffee is. I hope so, at least. So it allows people to donate a cup of coffee to you. So it depends on the currency you have set. In my case, it's pounds, so it's £3. If you have it set to US dollars, it's $3. Surprisingly, that is actually what a coffee costs in the respective countries. So, it's really useful. There's a button along the sidebar whenever you scroll through it, and it'll be in the show notes going forward. And it's really great because if you ever feel like you want to donate £3, you should do that. As well as that, we've been working on a Patreon, and I was listening to the Platform podcast. Was it last week you were discussing Patreon? It might be the week before.
We've actually talked about it a couple of weeks in passing, but yeah.
Because I think it was last week when you were discussing how wonderful their API is.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah, I've tried to fully integrate myself as much as possible. I have no use for the direct publishing to a Dropbox folder or to YouTube because these are live streamed to YouTube and they're backed up locally as well as on YouTube as it works out. But
the Dropbox thing is actually the other way around. It's actually publishing from a Dropbox folder, but we still have no use.
Yes, still useless, but good to get that corrected. And yeah, so I don't know. We'll see how this coffee goes. Go donate to it. There's a link in the show notes.
Yeah.
Go buy me a coffee because I'm running low. This is actually I had so my parents were here over Christmas, and so one of the things in Georgia is that they don't like good coffee here, for lack of a better phrase. Like the idea of milk in coffee is completely unheard of.
Yeah.
So unless you go to like a Starbucks, when there are no Starbucks here, but if you go to like a coffee shop, you can get coffee with milk in. But outside of that, it's completely unheard of.
Do they have cream?
Nope.
No. Oh, right. So it's
just black coffee.
Completely. Yeah.
So I've had these sent over from the UK.
Okay. Ooh.
Nescafe Gold lattes.
Right.
Purely because they have like the milk powder in them. And they're not so sharp to drink.
Yeah. See, I migrated over to black coffee a couple of years ago, and I've never looked back. And I was milk and, there was a time in my life it was milk and 3 sugars, then milk and 2, then milk and 1, then milk. Actually, no, I think I pretty much went from milk and 2 sugars and just went hardcore and just went, you know what, I'm just going to drink actual just coffee.
Right.
And so I have the little Nescafe Dolce Gusto pods.
Yeah.
And it's decent. It's fine. And so all of my coffee I drink black unless I'm having a cappuccino.
Yes, I am fully capable of drinking a black coffee, and I was doing it for like that's basically it. Yeah, what will happen is and I'd been drinking nothing but black coffee for like a month whilst here, and I was like, I just miss not feeling like my coffee is biting back every time I drink it. I think part of it is the quality of the coffee in Georgia.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
A large part of that is the quality of instant coffee here. But it was definitely one of those things where I was just like, I just need a smoother coffee drinking experience. Especially when...
I don't think... Sorry, go on.
I got this as a Christmas present from the TV station. So these guys, they can't afford to pay me. Right. So I'm doing a lot of work here, mostly volunteering. So just to put this into context, when I say they can't afford to pay me, I'm not saying like, oh, I'm requesting like, 25 grand a month. Half of this building currently doesn't have heating, like is shut off because they can't afford the heating for half this building. This is a TV station, right? And they can't afford to heat half a building. However, they have like a print press thing that they use to print merchandise onto. And so they took my Facebook profile picture, which was there up until yesterday, because I change my picture every month. And they printed that onto a mug. So I have this.
Yes! Christmassy mug!
Right? So if you're not, I'm not sure if you're aware of the context of this picture, but what it is I took pictures of myself in front of a green screen we have here, and my
Right.
mum had been sending pictures from home. And
Okay.
so I photoshopped myself into a bunch of pictures from home to be like, see, I'm here
Amazing.
too. Like that kind of deal.
Aw.
And so this is our living room. So that's like our Christmas tree. And I photoshopped myself into it. And then my wrist, if you look really closely at my wrist, you'll see how badly photoshopped that is.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Like, because I'd been pointing
That's like
like
the
up.
Ready Player One photo.
Because I'd been like pointing up, and then like I did like it was like intentionally bad, right? Because you know,
okay.
if you like look at it in like if you look at the picture, you can see a slight green outline, right? Which
Yeah.
the quality of printing on this is like you can't actually see it, so it looks better on this than it does in the actual digital version. But you know, that was part of the joke where it was obvious that I'd been photoshopped into my house, partially because I'm in Georgia, partially because the photoshopping wasn't that great, and there were a couple of different situations I photoshopped myself into. But yeah, this is printed on a mug, and it's now forever me.
That is delightful. Whimsical.
Oh man, it was because I was completely not expecting it, to be honest. Like I arrived after they'd done their Secret Santa draw, so I'd been watching everyone doing their Secret Santa madness, and then it got to I think it was like the day after Christmas or whatever it was. And so the guy, the CEO hands me a bag and is like, "Oh, and this is for you." And I was like, "What? You sure?" So I open it up. There's like a pair of socks, and then there's this, and they had the picture. They had this picture like on the front of the box, and it was at that moment I realized what it was and just burst out into laughter. Like, this is brilliant. So every now and again I'll be taking a swig of coffee and I'll be like pointing to myself on the mug.
Look at that, it's me.
Right?
It's me.
Yeah. It's great though. But yeah, so if you want to donate coffee, I'd highly appreciate it because Georgian coffee is terrible and I need more English coffee in my life. It's I think it's KO. Is it just KO.fi or is it
KO-FI.
KO-FY and then Snappy-Tech,
FI.
I believe.
Yeah.
Uh,
ko-fi.com/Snappy-Tech.
Yep, all one word, no hyphen. Oh, you know what? We're discussing the domain.
Yeah, that did it.
What quantifies a domain name, right?
Yes.
This is an interesting one. So this is, I try to create some brand consistency, right, across social media sites. You want that, right? So as much as possible, they all use the same image and they all have the same banner, which has just been resized to fit with, whatever app it's on, all that jazz. So it's as similar as possible. However, and this really pisses me off, Twitter allows underscores but not hyphens, right?
Yes.
So you can have G
Yes.
underscore Chachenize, which is my Twitter name, or Snappy underscore Tech.
Yep.
Facebook allows hyphens but not underscores. So our Twitter is Snappy underscore Tech. Our Facebook is Snappy hyphen Tech. And then there are some services that allow neither, and it's just Snappy Tech.
Yep. Yeah, the Twitter one, I'm trying to think because obviously a lot of the decisions they made were in conjunction with the whole SMS thing. And I don't really know why they made that decision because I can't see it being particularly problematic from an SMS point of view that you can you refer to someone by, because it's all just text. So yeah, I don't know why they made that decision.
It is worth noting that the underscore is the only character that gets that treatment, right?
Yeah.
So the best way to see that is like if you do a hashtag. So
Yes.
any other character will kill the hashtag apart from an underscore. So I don't know who decided that, but someone clearly did. Thank you, Twitter.
Well, again, I mean, like both of those things, atting, which has now become synonymous with Twitter, and the hashtag were both inventions of the community, effectively. They were not official Twitter things. So it's only just an arbitrary rule, really, that's been put in place to say this is the regular expression, this is the pattern of characters that we'll allow. That didn't necessarily have to be a Twitter decision.
And then on top of that, obviously,
because
the only thing it does is it creates that hyperlink, right? So if you do hashtag
yeah,
whatever, it's a hyperlink. But if you
yeah,
type in hashtag and then a random string of characters that Twitter doesn't usually recognize, it will still find that. It just doesn't
yeah,
hyperlink it. It's just really
yeah,
bizarre.
yes.
Damn it, Twitter. So hard. So we have the coffee integration. We have the switch over to Markdown.
Yeah.
What's in the because a lot of the changes in the last couple of months have been very much under the hood.
Yeah.
You know, an unobservant user of Podiant might not even notice that, you know, it's been changed from whatever it was before to Markdown, right? But
Yes.
you know, if they just type in a bit of text and leave it at that, they potentially wouldn't even notice. So what is some of the stuff that's being worked on that will have that sort of visual pizzazz, for lack of a better phrase?
Well, one of the biggest things, which started as an under the hood change and is being rolled out through a private beta at the moment, and then will be extended soon, is customizable themes.
Right.
So the ability to for anyone who is a little bit savvy, or you know can use a text editor, can basically modify any of the HTML and or CSS that make up their website.
Yeah.
So an example of this, it looks bobbins on mobile, it doesn't look good at all, but the Platform podcast actually no, Platform looks okay, but Thread, which are two shows that I do, they both use the same underlying theme, but I've made changes to the HTML and the CSS that just now do it for my sites.
Right.
And that's all fairly easy. So it's kind of modeled after the Tumblr idea. So there's a templating language that we use, and it's basically putting all of the work on the browser. So the browser does all the rendering now. Instead of us rendering a template server side, we throw all the templates at the browser and say, whenever you're asked for one of these, deliver it, and we just deliver the data to render the template. And so the browser now does all the work, and this makes it very easy for people to customize the themes. And so that's going to be a big thing, because it really will, you know, people could completely go from scratch and just have a complete, you know, rethink of their website for their podcast that has no bearing on any of the original themes. And so I'm really pleased with that, actually, how that's worked. And I think, you know, the actual theme editor works fairly elegantly, and so like I'm over the moon with how that's working. And a lot of that is in service of the next feature which is coming, which is very, very, very nearly done. Well, the beta of this is very nearly done, which is allowing people to create networks.
Right.
Which has been a very, very sought after addition, and it's become more relevant as the months have gone on, because of the fact that now, you know, every podcast needs to either be a community podcast or needs to effectively pay a subscription fee. Well, needs to, not effectively, needs to pay a subscription fee. People who were creating ad hoc networks and hosting some of the podcasts for free, and then one or two of them on the professional plan, that's now harder for them, because those free ones might not qualify for community hosting. And so more and more people want networks, and that was actually one of the big takeaways. So when I was live on doing effectively like an AMA, the day the news broke about the change to the business model, one of the big things that people said is, what about discounts for multiple podcasts? Now that everything is going to be paid for, what are you going to do for that? And what about networks? And so the two things kind of combined. So if you want to combine 3 podcasts into a network, you'll pay a little bit less than if you were to host 3 podcasts individually. And that go, you know, so you've got 3, 5, 10, or 20. I think are the 4 options that we've got at the moment.
Right.
And so that is so the reason the theme editor was important is it's more important for a podcast network to be able to have more control over their HTML, because you don't want all podcast networks on Podiant to look exactly the same. because the whole point of a network is it should have personality and whatever. So that's going to be coming up very soon, and it basically rolls podcasts into one site if you want them to. You can still have your own domain name and all that stuff, and you'll get things like unified dashboard for analytics, so you can see all of the analytics at a glance, like how many people listen to my network, which is really useful if you want to then approach sponsorships or approach companies for sponsorships, because you can say, spread out among my 3 or 5 podcasts, I get 2,000 listeners, and that might be enough for a company to say, all right, well, we'll throw some money to that. Each one of those podcasts does the ad, and they all share the revenue. And being able to have a unified dashboard for that kind of stuff is really useful. And then like hosts, so you're not duplicating information about all your hosts through all different podcasts and all that kind of stuff. So that's coming very soon, and I'm excited to see, as Steve Jobs used to say, I'm excited to see what you do with it.
Awesome. That is, we have 2 podcasts, and as you mentioned, the lowest tier is free. But when I saw you mention the networks, it was one of those things where I was like, that is something that definitely makes sense.
Yeah.
As I could see someone needing. More so than a lot of features, and it is part of the issue is that unless a feature is something that's really in your face, people don't really see it as a change, right? A lot of the important stuff happens under the hood, but because people don't see it, they don't really regard it as things that have changed. They're like, oh well, it still works the same for me. Like, what is it? Whatever. And so having something that is, that big thing of now you can edit really resets the counter, I guess, for lack of a better phrase, for, how much it seems like you're doing work. Which is a really bad way to phrase it, right? But it really, the best way I can think of this is whenever I get like a update for Snapchat, it always has like the same changelog. It's always bug fixes and performance updates or performance improvements. And so, every time I see that, I'm like, but what did you actually do? Right?
Yeah.
For all I know, it's literally exactly the same. You've just stuck that in and gone, hey, look, we're making changes. Right?
Yeah.
There's nothing that I can go, oh, look, this is different. Whereas, a design change is something that I can very clearly see as something that work has been put into. And it's good to see that there is definitely work being done there, because I'd hate for someone to be like, yeah, but if you look at it, it looks exactly the same as it did 3 years ago. So what do you mean they're doing something different?
Yeah, and that's one of the things that was an impetus for me to want to build Podiant, is seeing so many podcast hosts that haven't changed, that haven't updated, and have kept the same design ethos from more than 10 years ago, and to actually want to come in and say, look, I want something that's, I built this originally. I talked about this on an upcoming episode of a show called Packaged, which is about subscription services, and
right.
Like, I built this because I had a problem. I wanted my podcasts, which I'd moved away and wanted to self-host. I wanted a simple website, a simple player that looked okay, and a way to manage them. And so I just cobbled some stuff together, and it's grown from there, and it absolutely started with that kernel of, this must have this, but it also has to be tolerable to use, because it's me who's using it, and I don't want to. I've got enough of a thing where I like, if it doesn't work, if it doesn't have a good interface, I will be irritated at myself for not having built a good interface or used a good off-the-shelf interface. And so that's like, as they call it in the industry, dog fooding. The fact that I am Podiant's first customer. And so, I share pain points with every other podcaster, because I am at heart a podcaster, not just a web developer. a lot of the problems and a lot of the solutions I'm able to get to a little bit quicker, and I can move a little bit quicker because there's mostly just me doing it. It's not like a large company where it all has to go through committee and we have to, can we implement this design change? I'm a little bit more along the lines of, well, our user base is still relatively small. I'm a little bit more along the old Facebook adage, the old one that used to have move fast and break things.
Yeah.
I'd rather break it, find a quick resolution and move on than be too scared to keep evolving the platform.
And the one that I found really interesting was Pocket Casts, which is the app I use to listen to podcasts. I'd noticed their web player. Let me check what the exact date is. So their web player hadn't been updated in, I want to say, a couple of years. It might have been. And so I tweeted them like, guys, the hell's going on here? It'd be really nice to be able to, listen to proper. It's not that it didn't work. It was just missing features. September 6th, 2016.
Yeah.
And even that update was, one bullet point, which is added a Safari pinned tab image. Like, that's thanks for that, guys. Right. So I tweeted them. I was like, guys, what the hell's going on here? And they went, actually, we're rebuilding it from scratch. There's a beta that you can use. And so, version 2.0, it's currently on build 28. Last update being December 5th. So, they clearly took a Christmas break, as you can expect, because before then there'd been an update, multiple times a month, 2 within the same day, nonetheless. They accidentally broke casting in one update and fixed it again, like half an hour later. But, the fact that I can look at it and, even if most of these things aren't issues that occur to me, right? Like Safari on High Sierra no longer resets playback to 0. Like I don't use Macs, but that's an actual thing that I can go, that is something that has been quantifiably fixed, right? And those in detail change logs, even if it is, even if I'm just skimming over it and going, oh, that's a thing that, I could hypothetically actually test and make sure they fixed.
Yeah.
It gives me like confidence in a product.
Yes. Absolutely. Yeah, you want to know that people are still on it.
Yeah, and just saying, "Oh, we made some fixes," doesn't quite cut it for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, bug fixes and improvements, just as the single bullet point is. Yeah. And I don't know if you ever used. Sorry, go on.
No, go for it.
There's an application called CodeKit, which I use because I'm lazy and I can't be bothered to run a SAS compiler, which is a thing that turns one type of presentational code into a slightly different type of presentational code, basically. Whereas CodeKit actually just does it every time you save, and then it's simple and it's got lots and lots of other features that are useful.
Right.
But it used to. I haven't read them in a while, but it used to have very entertaining release notes, and so you would get the Mac auto update thing, and it would tell you a few actual useful things that have happened. We've upgraded this linter to this point, and we've added whatever else support for this minor language, and then it'll be like some reference to something that happened in this week's Game of Thrones. Right. Or something else, or I've got a new cat or whatever, like just stuff that will make you giggle that was in the release notes, and it was guaranteed that there would be something in there to just give you a little chuckle. But the most important thing is he showed you that the app was constantly being improved. It was always changes, and it was always good stuff. So yeah, people just want to know that things are still happening.
And you mentioned dog fooding, right? That you use Podiant yourself. And as you said that, I was thinking to myself, I feel so